The Gospel according to Matthew, the 11th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When John heard in prison what the Messiah was doing, he sent word by his disciples and said to him, "Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another?" Jesus answered them, "Go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, those with skin disease are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the poor have good news brought to them. And blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me." As they went away, Jesus began to speak to the crowds about John. "What did you go out in the wilderness to look at? A reed shaken in the wind? What then did you do? Did you go out to see? Someone dressed in soft robes? Look, those who wear soft robes are in royal palaces. Look, those who wear soft robes, what then did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, more than a prophet. This is the one about whom, oh, it's my voice that's getting me concerned here. What's happening? This is the one about whom it is written, 'See, I am sending him my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you.' Truly I tell you, among those born of woman, no one has arisen greater than John the Baptist, and yet the least of the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." The gospel of the Lord. Well, every morning I have 3 books that are this thick, and they're daily sayings, and one of them, this one, is called Daily Joy. And it has different topics throughout the year, and those different topics are something in which these quotations revolve around. They're basically one-liners. All right, so I thought, well, I'll read you a couple of these. This is from December 7th, last Sunday. "Faith is a bird that feels the light and sings when the dawn is still dark." How about that? "If you desire faith, then you have faith enough." And one more. This month is, did I say that? December is about faith, joy and faith. "The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart." Guess who? Helen Keller. "Rejoice, to have joy." Well, what about that? What about that concept? What about understanding that? This Sunday is about joy. It's about the shepherd's joy. It's about the joy that we experience. It's about the joy of various things. If you read it, listen to the text this morning, it's a lot about joy is in there. But when we come to the gospel, it doesn't seem like a lot of joy there. First of all, John the Baptist is in prison. So that can't be too joyful. Or can it be? Well, one of the gravest things, or one of the things that I think is one of the worst things in translation, is that in the Beatitudes, they have changed the words. Oh, jeepers, now it went away on me. Wouldn't you know it? Okay. One of the things about the Beatitudes is they change blessed to happiness. It's a whole different idea, a whole different thought. Not all translations are like that, but some of them are. It loses the meaning. It loses the depth of blessing. Just like happiness loses the depth of joy. Over the years, I've preached on this in some way or another all the time, and usually I have to say, I usually talk about sort of the opposite or the comparison of joy versus happiness. And so we need to understand that. So I did for fun, I decided, well, I'm going to look this up and see what the old, techie stuff has to say about this, you know. And by George, it's really good. It really captures the essence of what it's about. So I thought, well, I'm going to read this to you this morning. So it's joy versus happiness. Joy is a deep, lasting inner state of well-being and meaning, independent of circumstances. While happiness is a temporary, emotional high from positive external events, like getting a gift or good news that fades when the situation changes. Joy is chosen and sustainable, coexisting with sadness. That's one of the keys. But happiness relies on good conditions and disappears in hardship. You can look that up, Google it, joy versus happiness, if you want to see it again. So, that's the situation in which we find John the Baptist. He is, in a sense, in a situation of joy, not happiness. He doesn't want to be in prison. He doesn't want to send his disciples to ask Jesus this question. He would have liked to have gone and done it himself. What is it about joy? Joy is something that has deep meaning, deep consequences. Very much important to know the difference. Because that's the sense in which John is acting. And I think this has sometimes been a perplexing text, and I can't always say that I've got the exact answers, but I've got at least a way to look at it. And that is understanding that John the Baptist here in prison now is trying to understand if Jesus is really the Messiah or not. Now you would think, since they're apparently cousins, that he would know what was going on. But he needs some reassurance. He needs to really come to grips with the fact that this is the case. He really needs to understand that Jesus is the Messiah. He needs that final confirmation, if you will. And so he's sending his disciples there. Because John the Baptist is kind of like us. We are so locked into the culture and the understandings that pervades our society that when something different or counter enters that, we either are perplexed by it or dismiss it or just want to forget about it. John is trying to understand this person of Jesus and what it's really about. Because John has in his mind the conventional thought that there's some great warrior that's going to come and save Israel and release them from the bondage and the oppression of the Roman government. And John is not seeing that at all in Jesus. In fact, some people believe that's exactly why Judas did what he did, because he was disgusted because Jesus didn't do that. John needs to be affirmed that this is something different. He needs to be helped to understand that this is not a kingdom or a Messiah that they are expecting. That it's someone different. It's someone who is not depending upon power and prestige. I like that statement in there about soft garments. It's really a shot at those who have life of ease, that this kingdom is not for them. Because that life of ease surrounds them with a sense of strength and power and might that makes everything right. And Jesus casts that off. And so John the Baptist needs to be reassured and have a different understanding about this Messiah that comes, that is woven from a whole different cloth than what he was expecting and what all those other people that came out in the desert were expecting. You see, he needed to be reaffirmed to make sure that his joy was not happiness. That his joy was deep-seated. That he was joyful and rejoicing about Jesus. and it's a rejoice. To rejoice is to experience that joy and to understand that joy over and over and over again. To rejoice. Not just to have a one-time experience. Not just to feel good for a moment or for some time, because then it becomes happiness. It isn't about external circumstances. It's about the very heart of ourselves and how comfortable and how gracious and how understanding we are about the power of God working within us and within the world. That even everything looks dim and bad, it's not. Because God is there, acting out the joy for us so that we can rejoice. That's the story about John here. He needs to understand and rejoice that person of Jesus. Because just as Jesus is emphasizing a different kingdom. We saw that this morning if you listen to those words in the psalm about the lame and the blind and about the poor. You see, that's where the sensitivity is. That's where even though life circumstances may be difficult, it's not something that God cannot handle. That God does not bring it to us. But God gives us a way out. And so when John comes, or his disciples come to Jesus, and they ask about this question about, are you the Messiah, or should we wait for another? They're really reflecting the words of James, who is the farmer who goes out and waits patiently for the crop to come in the fall. To be patient and to wait. To wait, to have that joy that continually resounds in a person's body, continually resounds in a person's life, so that we can rejoice constantly and over and again, day after day, time after time. And Jesus says, look and see what's happened. Look and see that the lame walk, the blind see. Good news is preached to the poor. You see, the proof is in the pudding. How good was it? How good is it? How is Jesus? Is Jesus really it? And he just lays out before them and before us that it's Jesus' action. That Jesus comes and brings to us the grace of God. And there is the joy. And that we can rejoice over and over and over again. Because God has come to us. And in spite of our circumstances, we have the faith and the strength and the grace, the conviction, and all the good things that God brings to us in the person of Jesus to act out in our own lives. There's an Advent hymn that I really don't know the tune, I don't know the hymn. But like a lot of hymns, the words are great, even though we sometimes have struggled to sing them. And that's probably particularly true in Advent, as you maybe experience. But in this hymn, which is Hark, a Thrilling Voice is Sounding, I love this, and I just came across it this week, really. This is the fourth verse. It goes like this. So when next he comes in glory, because this is part of the Advent message, it's the second coming as well as the first, and the world is wrapped in fear. Isn't that a contemporary thought? What's interesting about this is this is a 4th or 5th century hymn. This was 1,500 years ago when this was written, when the words came down. And it only was translated in English in the 1800s. So all these years, people have understood that the world is wrapped in fear. And I think we should think about that for ourselves, that in a sense, we don't want to discount what we need to do. But at the same time, we have to realize that in a sense, our time is no different than 1,500 years ago or 200 years ago. And then it says this, he will shield us with his mercy and with words of love draw near. It's another image. He will shield us with his mercy. You see, that's the power of the cross. That's the power of Jesus. That's the power that Jesus says, look at my example. The reason you should have joy, the reason you should persevere, the reason you should rejoice over and over again. To be protected, to be shielded. It's a great image. And there's one more thing about patience. In the text from James today about being patient. There's a very parallel meaning in that sense. In fact, it's maybe even more the meaning, and that is of perseverance. You see, joy allows us to persevere those difficult times. So then we can rejoice. We can rejoice in God's grace. We can rejoice that God has shielded us with his mercy. Even though we're feeling the pain and the difficulties and the suffering in the moment, God is there working in our lives. And so just as John the Baptist needs to, in a sense, be reassured, as well as probably educated a little bit into a new understanding of the Messiah, it is true for us as well. That we need to understand that this Messiah is so different from the world that we live in. This Messiah is so more empathetic and compassionate, so more faithful, so more trusting, so more merciful, so much more gracious than the world can ever know. But that's where our joy stems. Our joy is deep-seated. As Helen Keller says, deep in the heart. The very sense of ourselves. That there we have joy. And then, day after day, time after time, we can rejoice because God has come to us in the person of Jesus. And so may the peace of God that surpasses all understanding keep your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Amen.